Hans, how are you? Great to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's good to be on, Ollie. Thanks for having me. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm back in England for a while. I just got here for a couple of days ago.
Okay. And what brings you over to England?
My wife's English, and we have a second home in the Midlands, and
Hmm.
we kind of jump back and forth, especially convenient in the summertime. And I'm often for long periods in Europe on different events and stuff and projects. So
Yeah,
coming back here instead of flying all the way to California is kind of convenient.
nice. And
Living,
what have you got?
yeah, a little
wh-
bit of the best of both worlds kind of a thing. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good spot to then kind of go out to different parts of Europe. And like, have you got any like what are the projects that you've got there? Like at the moment, are you kind of bouncing around or?
Well, the year's just getting started, and I am going to Spain next week. Sun Tour has a rider camp down there
Mhm.
with all their athletes, and I'm gonna go down there for a few days to near Alicante, and then
Okay, nice.
yeah, and the following week I'm going to go to Livigno. I'm actually going to go skiing there, but Livigno is a mountain resort in Italy that I've been working with for years, and I'm
Yeah.
usually there in the summer. And I have a few meetings coming up there, talking about summer projects, and I'm going to try to get a few days of skiing in.
Nice. And are you going to be biking over there as well? Are you kind of looking at
Actually,
or just skiing?
this time just skiing, but they do actually offer mountain bike tours in the winter, and it
Okay.
sounds really cool. And it's been a long time that I've ridden a fat bike properly in the snow, and I
Yeah.
think I'm gonna jump on one while I'm there and do one of those fat bike tours. That sounds really fun. So
And are they like e-fat bikes or are they regular?
no, they're fat bikes with the big old
Okay.
4.0 tires, and God knows what they if they have spikes. I mean, you usually don't need spikes, but they probably. Yeah, they probably have them for e-bikes too, and they have different tours. Some of them are on the Nordic cross-country slopes, and other ones are down the ski pist or even Freeride. Like down the powder slopes. So
Nice.
I'm kind of curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, it'd be cool to check it out.
Yeah.
Nice one. Cool. Well, I guess I mean I'd love to kind of jump back, not all the way back, like sort of like I'm super curious around um the whole sort of content side of it. I mean, because you were one of the pioneering athletes for I guess filming your different adventures on your bike and sort of
Creating
all the
content.
all the kind of like creating this amazing content and then the doors that opens. I mean, what was the idea behind that? Was that just something that you thought like we're going to be doing these fun things, we should document it, or what did you think at the time, or was it kind of sponsor related or?
Well, like I realized that at the end of the day, back in those days, in the let's say in the early '90s, it was mountain biking was all about racing. Like
Yeah,
stopwatches, lycra training, and the fun factor was kind of missing. And I tried and then I started doing my first videos, and I knew even from the racing days, at the end of the day, of course, sponsors like to win a race and have the bragging rights and show off their product. But at the end of the day, if you win, you get the exposure in the media.
yeah,
And traditionally, the only way to make a living in mountain biking was you race. And I kind of thought, well, there's other ways I think I can find media exposure. And that's what I did when and thought, well, there's other ways I think I can find media exposure. And that's what I did when I started doing these videos, and it opened up the door to a whole new audience and different markets, and also some mainstream media.
yeah,
And it was all of a sudden, like I would do these videos in the early days and later adventures, and they would like show up in like these documentary films. They live for a long time. A race is often forgotten 2 weeks later,
yeah.
even if it's the Olympics. But one of these adventure trips, they still kind of relevant 5 or even 10 years later. So yeah, I kind of found a way to make a living without being a racer, and that took some pioneer work or some adjustment for the bike industry. They weren't used. What, you don't want to race? Well, I don't know if we can sponsor you. And then you had to kind of prove yourself and do it all. And that was long before the internet. So
Yeah.
but you would get exposure in bike magazines, in some outdoor adventure magazines, but also on TV, on videos. People would like literally eat up those VHS tapes and wear them down, you know, and that was the only way they could actually see anything mountain bike related, because it was hard to find information. So I guess it was at the right time, to do all that.
And were you taking inspiration from pop culture? And this is sort of when like MTV was massive, right? And kind of came out. Were you sort of looking outside the biking industry and like seeing these things happening, going like, how can we bring this in?
Exactly, exactly. I always looked at other sports, be it surfing or windsurfing or BMX or motocross and all those things, and I was there in Southern California, and I would rub elbows with, being involved with Swatch at the time. They would sponsor extreme skiers and skaters and BMXers and especially the extreme skiers would influence me, because I would watch them go down these cliffs, and I go like, wow. I was so used to the Franz Klammer ski racing and all that from Europe. Yeah. Then these guys started doing these crazy things with cool music, and I was kind of saying, fuck, I want to be an extreme mountain biker. I don't want to be a racer anymore. And that's when I started doing these videos and these publicity stunts on my bike, and MTV. Yes, that was a big part. I mean, I not only did I tour with Swatch early on in the 80s they had this MTV Museum of Unnatural History tour that went from shopping mall to shopping mall, and Rodney Mullen and myself and a bunch of people would do demos, and I would be often featured on MTV had the first action sports program. They had this MTV Sports, it was called, and they would feature all these crazy sports. And so, yeah, there was that influence, and definitely, like you said, all these other sports. And sometimes, like I would see what happened to snowboarding. They seemed to be a few years ahead of mountain biking, and I figured mountain biking would kind of go the same path, and often there was a lot of parallels, so.
And did you just like, were you done with racing at that time, or were you still doing like a few races, or?
Yeah, I would still compete. I mean, I was done with. I stopped probably around 92, 93 doing the big international world championships in Europe, but I would still do the whole US circuit until probably 97, when I then kind of completely started focusing on my adventure trips. And then, like in 95, we had the X Games, and they actually had trials in it. I did that, and I would do all the Norba world. The Norba had their own world championships held in, I would do that, and I would do a little bit of downhill and slalom racing besides the trials competitions.
And you were in the first X Games, and actually like medaled, like didn't you get a silver there?
Yeah.
How was that whole thing when ESPN started X Games and having mountain biking involved? And
it was extremely cool, and I was really glad, because when they first started the X Games in 95, they picked a bunch of athletes, or one athlete from every sport, one skateboarder. They had Tony Hawk, and they had like Matt Hoffman for BMX, and they picked me as the trials guy, and they would push us in the months before the X Games and do like specials on us, and we would explain the rules. They wanted to make their audience familiar with the culture of these extreme sports, and familiar with some of the faces and rivalries and whatever, and or how it's scored. And luckily that year was a strike in Major League Baseball and hockey, and ESPN did not know what to put on TV. So they ran our stuff all the time. They ran my videos, and it was a great PR. But then mountain biking at the time, if you believe it or not, was the biggest sport, or the most organized sport in the X Games. At the time, BMX and skateboarding, they were really down at the bottom. They were like, the industry was kind of dead. And then they had small obscure sports in there like bungee jumping and rock climbing. And the mountain bikers were the most organized, and we had big corporate sponsors, and mountain biking was booming at the time, the golden years. And our federation kind of actually screwed it all up, because they had slalom, giant slalom, and trials in there, but they kept telling ESPN, oh, you have to do it this way or that way. And ESPN wanted to do it in big cities, and they were like, well, we need to go somewhere where they have mountains and stuff like this. And ESPN didn't like the fact that all the bikers had all these logos and sponsors on. ESPN had their own sponsors. So the bikers, said, we need to be at a ski resort. And at the end, ESPN said, you know what? Those guys were so complicated and difficult. Let's not use them anymore, or let's put them in the Winter X Games. That's where they have their mountains. And then they started doing the snow mountain biking, which is not really mountain biking either.
Yeah.
And that lasted a few years. But yeah, so it was kind of a shame, because we were off to a good start and it was a really cool thing, but it didn't last long. So.
And what did you do after? Was that when you were then looking at these adventures around the world and kind of remote places where you thought, like, we could do some cool trips around here and get some good content? And
yeah, that started slowly in those years. I used in those days I used to do a lot of trials demos, like at bike shops, at trade shows, at festivals, at events, and I would literally travel all over the world, and I would be often the first mountain biker that was kind of had a name who would go somewhere, because the races were always in the same places in Europe, Canada, and the US. But I would go and visit GT in Argentina or in Australia or in Japan and do these promo tours, and I got to make myself a name in all these different countries, and I continued doing my videos, and started, often tie in these exotic locations like in Jamaica or like in Africa on a bike safari. And then was also a time when I was hired for this Pacific Blue TV series that was kind of.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, that was kind of the Baywatch for mountain bikers. They had all these the Santa Monica Bike Police, and I did a lot of stunt work in that show. Yeah. Often like doubling a cop or a bad guy on a mountain bike. And then eventually, actually, they gave me my own part, and I actually got to play myself in the series for a few episodes as the coach. But that was a very cheesy show, but it was actually a very big show. And to this day, I meet people who tell me they started mountain biking because of the show. And
no way.
It aired in over 100 countries, and actually it still airs today in some countries. So anyway, so that kept me busy in those years.
Did you have acting lessons sort of around that or before, or were you just kind of, I'm going to play myself and doing stunts? And
you would think that's easy if you play yourself, but that wasn't the case, because they made me, my character was Hans Rey, the bike coach, but they made me look like I was this Eastern European guy. So they gave me this Eastern European accent with backwards sentences. Not that my sentences aren't backwards already, but they backwards them one more time. So it was sometimes actually harder than you think to play yourself, because it wasn't really you. It wasn't your own words. But no, it didn't have lessons, and it shows. Pretty bad acting.
And were you then kind of, so between seasons, were you sort of like bouncing sort of back and forth between trips, and so you'd come back and film and then head off, or?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, I would just like, Hollywood was on the doorstep, and that's how I got the job. So I would drive up there 3-4 times a week sometimes and film. And sometimes you miss some because you had a big event or so. There was other stuntmen on the show as well, so, but, and sometimes they didn't need you, but yeah, you would just fit it into the schedule, and all these things that happened in the 90s. It's like, I was young, and you didn't really know how cool some of those things were or how big they were. You just took them as they came, and only in retrospect you go like, wow, that's pretty cool, some of the stuff we used to do, but it didn't really hit us at the time. We were just
just enjoying the moment, right? And sort of,
we're young kids, and we had no expectations. It's like when when Danny McCaskill first got big, he had like David Letterman knock at his door and the New York Times, and he would be just like, I'm busy this weekend riding with the lads in Edinburgh, like I don't have time for that, kind of not realizing this doesn't happen all the time in pro
Yeah,
biking, this is something very special, so that's kind of how it was for us back then.
yeah. And like when you were planning these trips, did you try and like did you know people in the locations where you were going to go initially, or did you try and reach out, or was it that like full explorer mode where you would try and find maps and whatever
Yes,
you can get hold of, and then let's sort of see if there was trails?
all of that, like the world has really changed in that regard, because yes,
Yeah,
I would maybe know some guys from a distributor or from a racer from a different country, or somebody who would send me a letter or something, and I would ask him, hey, do you know like anything about Machu Picchu, and can you get there? And then I would buy Lonely Planet books. That was kind of before the internet,
yeah,
and study them. And they used to be pretty good, and they often had trekking routes in there, and those were the perfect kind of trails for my riding style. These hardcore hiking trails that most mountain bikers wouldn't be able to ride, and we would put them into our stories. But then I would sometimes go as far as buy rare books and try to read between the lines if there's any description of the terrain or the trails in the jungle, and literally, like, it was like painstakingly hard to find often information, and you would often go to a place and then kind of wing it, or you hired a local guide who a little bit I mean, I'm not even talking about a mountain bike guy. They didn't exist in most of those
yeah.
places like they do now. It was just like somebody with a connection, and often it would be kind of a real adventure. There was a lot of unplanned stuff or unforeseen stuff coming our way.
Did you have any prerequisites about what kind of destinations you wanted to go to,
Yeah,
or
yeah, all the
like
stuff I wanted to check off my bucket list.
okay,
No, but I had always an interest in the mystery and history of stuff, and all these places around the world, from the pyramids in Egypt to Machu Picchu to the terracotta warriors in China,
yeah,
like all those things I had always an interest in, and literally they were bucket lists for me. And I was like,
okay,
why not do a trip there? And it's not about going there and hopping around on your bike. It's like, do a real expedition, like kind of an Indiana Jones on a bike, and do something that nobody had done before, like traverse a mountain range to get there, or ride a trail that was never ridden on a bike or was unrideable, but at the same time have a little mission and look into the history of these places and educate the audience about some of the mysteries and histories, and sometimes even do firsthand research. I had some inside knowledge sometimes from some books and groups I belonged to then about these ancient mysteries, and I often
yeah,
was like researching some stuff that was really controversial or really unknown, or was very yeah, just like interesting stuff. I tried to tie to my storylines, and that's kind of was always the idea behind my adventures, to have more than just a biking thing,
yeah.
make them a bit broader.
So it would go beyond it would be beyond like mountain biking, right? So then anyone can sort of look at it and go, that like that's an interesting story, whether you ride or whether you don't. And
Yeah, and I was always kind of looking at, often you had the scenario that the guys are into mountain biking and not necessarily their spouses or so.
yeah,
But I wanted to make a show that not only the guy would enjoy, but his spouse would find it also interesting, because there's all this travel and culture and history in the show. And yeah, just have a reason why you do it, like be you know do some like discovering stuff and educate people, and that's how I carry that on with my urban adventures. Is often like we wanted to have a closer look at these cities,
yeah.
so from the far remote we started going to the most busy cities in the world.
And would you always bring a photographer or a videographer with you on those
Yeah.
trips? And the idea was to sort of explore, but then also get this content which you could show. And
Yeah, at the beginning, the photographers were more important, and not always did we have film. Usually, actually, we did have film, and we started making films for even videos or for TV started to pick up mountain biking in the late 90s. And
Hmm.
there was these journals, half-hour shows, or out OLN was Outdoor Life Network, or Outdoor, yeah, I think Outdoor Life Network. They would do a lot of my trips, and some of the stuff went mainstream to like NBC or so. They would start having these adventure trips, and these outdoor sports became popular. But at the beginning, it was all about photography and making stories for the magazines.
Yeah.
Magazines were the thing. Again, that was before internet, and then like not until the late 90s, the internet slowly started to come, and it was still very small in mountain biking. But I remember I did a trip, I think in 2001, to Egypt, and I tried to be like really cool and have like not just a story come out 3 months later, upload some photos. I built a website. I was one of the first mountain bikers to have a website back in 98 or so.
Hmm.
And I wanted to upload photos, just like little 100, like postcard little things. And I
Yeah.
remember like I spent like hours to try to upload a little thumbnail photo, like onto to email to somebody. And I remember having a $800 phone bill from my hotel in Egypt, and
Wow.
the photo had still not gone through. So those were days when, yeah, it was all a little bit different. But and then, yeah, like I said, eventually from the print media and TV, it shifted over to the internet, of course, and now it seems to be all about that. But I actually still believe and into the traditional media as well. I
Hmm.
think they have a value and a place, and you just have those media have to adjust to the times, and
Yeah.
magazines, but they definitely have their place. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I mean, like you were in over, was it like over 400 magazine covers?
I reckon, yeah.
Which is astonishing. I mean, um, was that like do you reckon that was just because of having relationships worldwide with all the different publications at the time? And
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, it's kind of an obsolete record now. You tell somebody you've been on 450 magazine covers, and they go like, "What's a magazine?" Or kind of, they don't really get it. But
yeah.
yes, because but I I made stories that had appeal. So a story would like run in 25 different countries. Like it would run in a Spanish magazine, in a Portuguese magazine, in a English, in a American. It would run in some mainstream stuff, and we
Hmm.
would just push these stories, and I would always find ways. And the advantage I had as a trials guy, I could show visually something. I mean, this was, I started doing these extreme biking things before free riding even existed in mountain biking, and it was something different, and it was really entertaining the crowds and the people, or the magazines liked an action photo of me jumping off something, or
Yeah.
so I had this advantage. And then I would like push the stories. I always felt, other guys started doing adventures and photos and all this, and it's all good, but they would do it and they would end up in one magazine. It's like, why just one magazine? Why not get it out there to all the magazines? And that's how I kind of, like my career was kind of in that way always very global. Not
Yeah.
just I wasn't just like a guy in one country. I I would be present everywhere. And if you didn't hear about me or see something about me in France, for example, for like a while, that means I was just busy in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
And so I would like jet set back and forth. So
And you were managing all this yourself, weren't you? I mean, that was kind of
yeah, that's
quite a lot to
for
take
better or
on. And
worse, I guess, for better or worse. But yes, I did, and I am, and it's still a full-time job. People think like all we do is get up and go ride bikes, but
yeah,
I
you just
spent
have
like
fun all
eight
day and just go
hours.
riding.
Yeah, I spend way more time in the office and working on my career and the results and with sponsors, and then riding actually the bike. And that's fine. And I work with certain managers on certain projects, but I could never find the guy that could understand everything,
Yeah.
and not only understand the business but also help me get to the next level. I would have loved to have a manager who can introduce me to Coca-Cola back then, or put me in the mainstream media. But then that manager would be the kind of guy would be too small of a fish for him, or he wouldn't understand mountain biking at all, and then he would go
Yeah.
to GT or somebody and screw up my relationship. So it was always a give and take and finding the right guy. And I ended up, I always had a bit of a marketing sense, and it seemed like it helped me, kind of evolve and keep it going.
Yeah.
And so yeah, do it
And
yourself.
and when when did the charity start? Because was that sort of what you were seeing when you were doing these trips, and you were kind of looking at sort of some of the less developed places in the world, and was that sort of when Wheels for Life, when that was started, or how did that come about?
Yeah, it came a bit later in my career in 2005. So I was at that point I was already almost 20 years in the business, but I kind of always felt very fortunate to have a career and make a living with biking, and I realized going to these remote places in the developing countries how bike had a completely different meaning, bikes, than to us. For us they were
Yeah.
sport objects or toys, and for them having a bike can make all the difference. They can all of a sudden go to school because the school is 7 miles away and they had to walk. They don't have
Yeah.
money, they don't have public transportation often, and the bike can really mobility is really the key out of poverty. And we give bikes to healthcare workers and farmers. And I ended up doing this seminar, and part of this was like to start like to do like something good, like usually it's a little neighborhood event or something do for your neighborhood or so. And I
Hmm.
was like, you know what, I'm going to give 50 bikes away to one of those villages that I had visited in the past, and I had no idea about charities and even how I would do it. And once I started looking into it, I kind of realized it's not going to end with these 50 bikes. And that's how Wheels for Life got started. We started this charity, and since 2005 we've given away over 15,000 bikes in 30 countries. And it's basically my wife Carmen and I who run it, and we run it completely voluntarily. We're not getting paid, it's not a way of income. We're actually a completely pure charity
Hmm.
that just like tries to do a little good in the world.
Yeah. And then seeing the impact it has is amazing, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
on these communities, and yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, it's hard for us to realize how important bikes are, and that's yeah. So that's and we're still doing this. Every year we're a small charity, but like I said, we're super pure, and yeah, we give people for people in we give bikes to people in need of transportation.
Yeah, nice. And I guess now, kind of taking it from from all those remote places and destinations that you went, you've done a series for the last couple of years around urban adventures. And what was the shift there? Were you like, you know what, I want to do something different. I want to do, like, now focusing on sort of city hubs and where you can ride, and instead of, going like completely off the beaten path, or
Yeah, all of that. I've done all the remote things. I've done Kilimanjaro, which is the highest mountain in Africa at almost 6,000 meters, and um, to me that was kind of the Everest for mountain biking.
Mhm.
I know people have taken their bikes higher than Kili, but those are usually the record seekers who just carry their bike up and down and carry it back down. But Kili, we actually could ride down it, and then it was really a challenge
Yeah.
with a bike, especially if you do it, you know, unsupported. But yeah, and I was just thought it was time for a change. It seemed like before that the map was white and I could just pick a place, and chances are nobody had ever been there before. But nowadays it's hard to find a place where nobody has been, and everybody and their brother seem to make these adventures, or often they even fake them, just do photo shoots and call them adventures. And I just thought it
Yeah.
was time to do something different. And again, some of these big cities are bucket list destinations for me. I was always interested to go to Hong Kong or to you
Mhm.
know some of those places, Napoli or so, and do something there. again, using my trial skills where I can do some urban stuff, but we actually tying in also the e-bikes quite a bit.
Oh,
I'm a
nice.
big fan of e-bikes. I mean, I haven't given up my regular bike, but I think the e-bikes open up a whole different world and possibilities. And so we bring these e-bikes and we go to these big cities that have really incredible nature surrounding them. And we often do a 5-day traverse, and we're showing the contrast between this nature and harmony and the urban jungle and the chaos and the
Yeah.
rich and the poor and the history and the culture and all the famous landmarks, but also the little known neighborhoods. And so many cities have really cool little trails and stuff. And we just launched a couple of days ago. My latest adventure was in San Francisco in the Bay Area, Slay Bay, and it's on my YouTube channel. And it gives you a pretty cool idea of these places, and they're really fun to. It's the best way to explore these big cities, actually, on a
And
bike.
are you mixing it up between e-bike and regular mountain bikes, or is it kind of completely
Yeah, I mix it up, and in
okay?
all these past trips, I've usually do like half the stages on an e-bike, and on other days I ride the regular bike. So we mixing it up, you know. Often the urban stages we do on the e-bike, so we can cover
Mhm.
more ground and get around. But and yeah, so far we mix it up, and I have different like guest riders who join me, you know, like other pro riders or celebrities sometimes. You know, we had Missy Jovi on the LA trip, or Martin Mays came to Hong Kong, and we had like Brett Tippy in the last one, and we had all the clunkers in the last one, the
Yeah,
original pioneers, you know, Joe Breeze and Charlie Kelly and those guys. And we had Jackson Goldstone, who is the future of the sport. So it was such a cool mix of people who came and went. You know, some of them only would join us for half a day, and others, you know, like Tippy was there the whole time.
and were you going on the original clunker trails and
Yeah,
kind of do that whole race and
we actually those guys brought the original clunker bikes out of the museum by the Hall of Fame there in Fairfax,
that's so good.
and we got to race the legendary repack race that
Mhm.
started this whole thing that turned from balloon tire bikes into what we now know as mountain biking. And we raced that, or we rode down that fire road, but it's actually a pretty fast fire road, especially on those sketchy bikes they used to ride then, those clunker bikes. So yeah, that was definitely a highlight for all of us that day when we got to rub elbows with the OGs.
Nice. And what's the next urban adventure that you guys have got planned?
Well, I'm working right now on Mexico City, so that hopefully I can pull that off this summer. So that's the next one, and I have a few others on my list for the following years. These trips are a lot more work than you realize.
Yeah.
Not just the planning and then the producing them and doing them, and then the editing. I mean, and the distribution of the story, all that is like you cannot really do too many of them, you know, because they are very time consuming. But
Yeah.
they fun. You learn a lot in the process, and they're really fun to do. And like I said, there's often little side stories about, like in Hong Kong, we happened to be there right during the protests, you know, and it was pretty
Oh,
gnarly,
wow.
the demonstrations. I mean, we were literally like stuff, you know, tear gas in the
In this,
air.
were you
And
guys in the city then when that was kind of happening,
yeah,
or you were okay?
we were literally in the middle of all of that. And I remember at the time we were saying, kind of joking, saying, well, Hong Kong might never be the same after this. And that's, I mean, look what happened now with the Chinese taking over and all that.
Yeah.
And or the same when we went to Napoli, you know, we tied in not only that whole Italian culture, but we went to the Vesuvio volcano and this awesome crater we got to ride along,
Yeah.
and we got to go to Pompeii, you know, and so there's always some kind of a cool angle to everything, you know. And yeah, so hopefully in Mexico we have a few cool things planned there.
Yeah, and I mean, and Mexico, like, I mean, Mexico City is so ginormous. I mean, there's so much that you can potentially cover on the urban sort of side of it, but then also, I guess, like the whole historic, like from the Aztecs and everything else, right? And
Exactly, the pyramids, and then
yeah,
the volcanoes they have around there. You know, some of those volcanoes are over 5,000 meters
yeah,
tall. You know, they're huge, and they have actually really cool bike parks all over, like in Mexico City. And so there's a lot of really cool and colorful things to do.
And now, like, I guess sort of looking back through your career and like all these places and these things which happen like unexpectedly when you're on these trips. I mean, is there anything that sort of stands out, do you reckon, that was sort of, I guess, one of the most sketchiest times, or when you thought,
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you don't realize how close you were from trouble.
yeah,
But and it's often when you mess with Mother Nature, like we've been like doing stuff on active volcanoes with literally like hot lava spraying around us, and riding on ground that wasn't even 24 hours old because volcanoes were
wow,
erupting. So those things are really the most dangerous. There was a few situations when I think we almost got robbed in Africa, but we kind of rang the alarm bells and were aware, and I think we prevented something that could have been pretty sketchy in a very remote place. And then like we had to deal with the Secret Service when we were in China at that time. We were kind of on a crazy mission. We were looking for an alien dwarf tribe, and I had all this information. And as crazy as it sounds, like years later, the History Channel called me up and said, "We're doing a documentary on this tribe, and we found out that you kind of got the closest to ever like get to them and stuff." So there was something to it, but at the time, the Secret Service was with us, and they did not want us to go there, and it got pretty
wow,
political and weird. And of course they didn't admit that they were Secret Service, but they obviously were. But so stuff like that happened all along, in Egypt. We had the police traveling with us, and they thought they could escort us with like completely unprepared going through the Sinai Desert. We had all this outdoor adventure camping equipment with us, and these guys like they would get stuck with their car in the sand, and then we wouldn't see them for a day or two until they recovered and caught up with us again. But there were stories like that all along. So yeah,
yeah.
good
I
times.
get, I guess that's all part of it, and sort of what makes it, right, and kind of,
Exactly, the unexpected. You always have to expect it, and they say an adventure doesn't start until a journey goes wrong. And that is often true. Like otherwise it's just a journey. And like a quote I read once from a guy that kind of brings it home too is he said the two best things about adventures is A, planning them, and B, bragging about them afterwards. Often when you're actually there and doing them, they're not that fun, like you're
yeah, yeah,
miserable and wet and cold and lost and hungry and all that stuff. So yeah, there's some truth to that.
yeah. And what else, like, have you got kind of, I guess, on the bucket list, or things that you want to kind of do later this year, or kind of going into the future?
Well, I'm still like full on a pro rider. I would have never dreamt in my age that I would still be a sponsored rider and so active traveling. And nowadays, besides these bigger projects like those urban adventures, I do a lot of going to events for sponsors and
Mhm.
doing appearances when the world gets normal again, and we're doing other video projects, like create content for the media and the social media. And then you between like festivals and trade shows and um, filming projects and sponsor stuff, then each sponsor has their own needs. You test stuff, or you do an appearance or a shoot for them. So
Yep.
the calendar fills up really quickly. And yeah, like I said, e-bikes are very important for me. I really believe in them. I think it's a cool addition to our sport of mountain biking. And sometimes I wonder if I should repeat some of my old adventures on an e-bike. It would
Oh,
be
really?
it would be a whole different thing if one could figure out the whole battery issue. But I guess there's solar panels, and maybe you can stash batteries or so. But
Just to
along.
cover more ground, do you think, or
Yeah, and I mean, like
just a different way of riding?
for example, if you go to Kilimanjaro, even on the lower slopes, you're already at such high altitude that if you pedal your bike up even a small fire road, that's usually no problem. It's very exhausting, and that's how people get altitude sick. They overdo it. Even they
Right.
don't feel it at the time. It usually has a 24-hour delay when it really, they go like, oh, this is nothing. I pedal up a road like this all the time at home, but it's different at 3,500 meters or higher.
Yeah.
So on an e-bike, you could zip up those things, while on my regular bike, you just say, you know what, I got to take it easy. I walk up this road now, and it's like very slow and it takes
Yeah.
time. On an e-bike, you could almost consider try to do it really quickly in one day or so and get it done with. So you don't have to
Yeah.
worry about getting altitude sick, but who knows. But there's new options, and what I like about the e-bikes the most is these technical challenges. I can write up stuff that I could have never done because you know technical steep climbs are so
Yeah.
much fun, and it opens up a whole new world. And I can go also a lot further. Often I do these 1 day backcountry trips where I just bring two batteries and I get lost, and I wouldn't have the strength or the time to do those big a loop like this on a regular bike. So it's just different.
Yeah.
They both good. Like people always make it like you have to be either on the e-bike side or on the regular bike
Yeah.
side. That no, you
You
can
can
do
do
both.
both.
You can
Exactly.
go 1 day cross country skiing and the next day you go alpine skiing. So it's
Yeah.
the same with that. So
Yeah. And um, are you still doing these media books for all your sponsors? Don't like every year you kind of like
yeah.
collaborate everything that everything that you've been in, then kind of present that back to them.
Yeah, and that is like doing your tax returns. It's like so painstakingly hard work because I mean you do all that stuff and you have to kind of present it to them too, that they see what you've done, and putting it all together. And I learned to make this big book where it's all in, and you send it to them at the end of the year. And I think it has saved my butt a lot of times. And other times you get the feeling, do they even look at it? Do they care? And everybody wants everything digital these days. But if you send somebody that on a small phone like this, they look at it for 2 seconds and put it away.
Yeah.
That book has an impact. And often my sponsors use it as the example of what an athlete, should do, for their sponsor, and to make, to show it all. So anyway, yeah, I do these books. And I have also nowadays digital versions. So if you want to check them out, you can go on my website to my media section, and there's the books from the last few years at least.
Nice one. And what's the best way if people want to follow you, and or if they want to reach out? What's the best way to get in contact?
I guess social media. I'm most active on Instagram. I do Facebook a bit, and I have a website, and you can even ask me questions there. But I try to get back to people, when they ask something or so. And the YouTube channel, of course, is like a big platform because
Yeah.
there's a lot of my old stuff on there, but also I constantly produce new stuff, like my adventure trips, or I did a how-to series last year, or different stuff. I did a visual podcast during the pandemic, where
Hmm.
I kind of told the stories of my adventures, like with the photos and some video clips.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
so all that kind of stuff.
Cool. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out on the YouTube channel for when Mexico City's come in, and all the other projects you're going to be working on. And yeah, Hans, thanks so much for your time. It's been amazing chatting and hearing your stories.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and I look forward to check some of your other episodes out.
Cool. Thanks, Hans.
Nice. All right.
Ciao.
Take care.